In the age when naval power meant steel, size, and the roar of giant guns, the United States built war machines nearly 900 feet long, with enough armor and firepower to flatten cities and withstand enemy barrages. But what drove America to create floating fortresses that could hurl shells 24 miles only to watch them become obsolete in a single generation? To understand the rise and fall of the biggest battleships, we have to go inside their design, their scale, and the ambition that made them legends. Stretching 887 feet from bow to stern, an Iowa-class battleship dwarfed nearly everything afloat in its era. The hull alone displaced around 57,000 tons at full load, more than a dozen World War II destroyers combined. 4 massive General Electric turbines, fed by 8 Babcock and Wilcox boilers, unleashed 212,000 shaft horsepower. That power drove the ship's 4 propellers, each up to 18 feet in diameter, pushing this steel giant to speeds of 33 knots. For a vessel of its size, such velocity was almost unheard of, a necessity to keep pace with the Navy's fastest aircraft carriers. The real heart of the ship's offensive might sat in 3 armored turrets. Each turret housed 3 Mark 7 guns, the largest ever mounted on a U.S. warship. These 16-inch barrels could hurl a 2,700-pound armor-piercing shell out to 24 miles, far beyond the horizon. Every shot required careful coordination from gunnery officers and turret crews, who managed the delicate sequence of loading silk powder bags, ramming the shell, and aligning the massive breech. A single salvo from these guns could level a city block or punch through the thickest armor afloat. The Mark 7's range and destructive force made it a weapon of both AWE and terror. Each gun measured 66 feet long and weighed nearly 120 tons. The recoil from a full broadside would shove the ship sideways in the water, even at anchor. In practice, the Iowa class could deliver 2 rounds per minute from each gun, raining a steady barrage on targets miles away. To support such firepower, the battleship's hull was engineered for both stability and survivability. The design balanced armor, buoyancy, and weight distribution to keep the main battery effective under combat conditions. The combination of speed, size, and gunnery placed the Iowa class in a league of its own, an apex predator built for decisive surface combat. Every inch of the design spoke to the ambition of an era when naval dominance was measured in steel, steam, and the thunder of the main battery. Steel alone could not guarantee survival in battle. The Iowa class relied on an armor scheme known as all or nothing, concentrating the thickest protection around vital areas like magazines, engine rooms, and command spaces. The main armor belt stretched along the waterline, measuring 12.1 inches thick, enough to shrug off a direct hit from enemy shells at typical battle ranges. Turret faces, shielding the Mark 7 guns and their crews, reached an extraordinary 19.5 inches of hardened steel. Even the conning tower, where officers directed the ship under fire, was encased in over a foot of armor. Every ton added for protection meant sacrifices elsewhere. Less room for crew comforts, tighter compartments, and a ship that demanded relentless maintenance. Inside this fortress, nearly 2,900 men during World War II kept the ship alive and fighting. The crew formed a floating city, divided into specialized departments: gunnery, engineering, supply, medical, communications, and more. In the engine rooms, teams worked in deafening heat, monitoring turbines and boilers around the clock. Turret crews operated in cramped, sweltering spaces, handling powder bags and shells, with the knowledge that a single mistake could prove fatal. Supply teams managed mountains of food, ammunition, and spare parts, ensuring every department had what it needed to function far from shore. Daily life revolved around strict routines and constant drills. Cooks prepared thousands of meals a day. Bakers turned out fresh bread. And medical staff stood ready for anything from battle wounds to everyday illness. Workshops repaired everything from radar sets to coffee pots. Even laundry and barber shops operated below decks, supporting the relentless pace of operations. Every decision in armor layout and crew organization reflected the hard lessons of naval warfare. The ship's strength depended not just on steel, but on the discipline and endurance of the people inside. For the Iowa class, victory and survival rested on this fusion of engineering and human effort, each reinforcing the other under the immense pressures of war. Smoke and thunder rolled across the Pacific as Iowa-class battleships joined the fleet for their first real test, combat operations unlike anything imagined on drawing boards. Instead of slugging it out with enemy battleships, these giants became the backbone of carrier task forces, their speed and firepower transforming how the Navy fought island by island. On approach to Saipan, bombardment teams worked through the night, plotting coordinates from spotter planes and shore observers. At dawn, the Mark 7 guns opened fire, sending shells the size of small cars arcing over 20 miles to shatter bunkers and airfields. Gunnery officers and fire controlmen tracked every shot, adjusting for wind and distance, while damage control teams readied for return fire or air attack. Carrier groups relied on the battleship's guns to soften beachheads before Marines landed. At Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the Missouri and her sisters fired thousands of rounds, flattening pillboxes and supply dumps, sometimes for days without pause. Below decks, powdermen hauled silk bags through sweltering passageways. Loaders worked in shifts, and doctors braced for casualties as fragments and shockwaves rattled the hull. When Japanese aircraft broke through the fighter screen, the battleship's secondary batteries, dozens of 5-inch and anti-aircraft guns, filled the sky with flak, protecting carriers at the center of the formation. Coordination was relentless. Flag officers on the bridge issued orders by radio and signal lamp, synchronizing barrages with carrier airstrikes and destroyer screens. Every department played a role, from radar operators tracking incoming threats to cooks feeding exhausted gun crews between salvos. The ship became a floating fortress and nerve center, its presence reassuring to sailors across the task force. In these campaigns, the Iowa class proved their worth not in duels with enemy battleships, but as the ultimate support for amphibious invasions, and the shield for America's new capital ships, the aircraft carriers. Jet aircraft changed the rules of naval warfare almost overnight. By the end of World War II, American carriers could launch strikes more than 200 miles away, 10 times farther than the reach of a battleship's main guns. The battleships that once guarded the fleet now relied on the carriers' planes for their own protection. Armor and heavy shells, once the ultimate defense and offense, mattered less in an era where a single bomb or torpedo from the sky could sink even the mightiest ship. After the war, the Iowa-class ships spent years in reserve, their steel hulls moored in quiet harbors, while the Navy's attention shifted to new threats. Yet the allure of their power lingered. During the Korean War and the Vietnam War, these ships returned to service, firing their 16-inch guns in support of troops ashore. But it was the Cold War that gave them one last moment in the spotlight. In the 1980s, the Pentagon ordered a sweeping modernization. The Iowa-class battleships were refitted at enormous expense, each ship costing hundreds of millions of dollars to bring back into fighting shape. Their World War II-era fire control systems gave way to digital electronics. New weapons joined the old Tomahawk cruise missiles, capable of striking land targets 1,000 miles away, and Harpoon anti-ship missiles, designed to hunt enemy vessels over the horizon. Phalanx close-in weapon systems bristled on their decks, ready to knock down incoming missiles. Even with these upgrades, the battleship's days were numbered. Their size, crew requirements, and vulnerability to modern guided weapons made them expensive to operate and difficult to protect. By 1992, the last Iowa-class battleships were retired for good. The era of the giant gunship had ended. Today, these steel giants serve as museum ships, permanent reminders of a time when naval power was measured in armor plate and the thunder of big guns. Curators and veterans keep their stories alive, guiding visitors through silent corridors and gun turrets that once shook with the force of battle. No navy has built a battleship since the Cold War. Yet, as global tensions rise and new technologies emerge, the lesson endures. Military power is always temporary, and dominance can vanish with a single innovation. Every era's giants eventually become relics. What will ours leave behind?